Enough to be drunk.
So you were drunk.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are going to say, Deborah, you were drunk that night. Is there any chance you did anything that hurt your daughter that you're just not telling us?
No, no. And if I thought there was a chance, I'd say it. No, no. I don't think that alcohol changes a person enough to do something like that.
This is one of the most horrifying stories that ever unfolded in the heart of America. A story that made people's hands shake when they locked their own front doors. What happened in this house on North Leicester Avenue seemed impossible, and at the same time, all too real. It started quietly, almost ordinary, and it ended with a night that's still called one of the most terrifying in Kansas City. Before we dive in, I need you to do something important. Hit the like button on this video right now because it helps the algorithm push these stories to more families who need to see them. Subscribe if you haven't already, and please share this on your social media. Leave a comment with the city where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It matters to me to know where and when people are willing to stand up for children. The mother was 25-year-old Deborah Bradley. She was still legally married to military man Sean Bradley, and the reason was embarrassingly simple. A divorce cost $300. $300, an amount the family couldn't afford. This tiny detail said more than any words about their financial situation, a detail that exposed their poverty and instability right down to the bone. Friends described Deborah as someone who always craved attention. She was an attention seeker, recalled former best friend Shirley FAF. I could barely have other friends around her because she would do things to cause a scene everywhere. Sometimes way too much. She could make scenes in public, could snap and change moods quickly. But the most disturbing thing was something else. Deborah had a habit of putting her life on display on social media. Every party, every drink, every fun time instantly went on Instagram. Even on that day, October 3rd, when everything still seemed normal, she managed to take several selfies with a glass of wine. Her priorities were pretty clear, but at the same time, she seemed like a loving mom who really cared about her kids. At least that's what everyone thought. The father was Jeremy Irwin, a 29-year-old electrician. He had an 8-year-old son, Blake, from a previous relationship with Racine R. His ex-wife lost custody of the boy in 2008, and now he lived with Jeremy. The man worked hard, often overtime, and constantly looked exhausted. Together, they created a family. They lived in a house with 2 boys and a little girl. Money was tight, but they tried to make it work. From the outside, a typical American family. Inside, tension that even friends noticed. Their daughter was named Lisa Renee Irwin. She was born November 11th, 2010. Blonde with blue eyes, a birthmark on her right thigh, and her first 2 little teeth just coming in. Her brothers called her Pumpkin Pie. Lisa was a happy baby. She loved bananas and spaghetti, fell asleep hugging her light-up glowworm toy, and often reached for her older brothers, trying to copy their movements. She had a Cars blanket and several Barney stuffed animals that she cuddled every night. Usually they put her to bed around 7 or 8 at night. They always closed the door to her room to block out noise from the boys playing. It seemed like this little girl brought harmony to the house. Deborah said Lisa made their family complete. The one who truly finished our family, but the harmony turned out to be fake. Their house on North was pretty much like every other house on the block. Neighbors knew each other by name. In summer, kids played in the yards. Adults sat on porches with coffee. Everything looked peaceful, safe, almost too perfect. But there was a crack in this perfect picture that nobody wanted to see. A week before Lisa disappeared, several neighbors called police to complain about a suspicious man who was hanging around the playgrounds. About average height, skinny guy looked like he was in his 40s. Police wrote down the complaints and did nothing. Not enough evidence to make an arrest, the officers explained. But it's exactly in this kind of system indifference where real danger hides. Because where it seems like nothing bad can happen, where officials brush off little things, that's where the worst nightmares are born. October 3rd, 2011 started like any other day. That afternoon around 2:30, Jeremy came home from work. He had lunch with the kids, spent time with them. It was a scene that looked ordinary, but would later become the last peaceful memory. Later that afternoon, around 4:30 or so, Deborah went to Festival Foods with her brother, Philip Netz. Cameras caught them buying baby food, diapers, and a $40 box of wine. And here's what keeps bugging me. A family that couldn't afford $300 for a divorce. A family living paycheck to paycheck spends $40 on alcohol on a Monday. $40. That's half a week's worth of food for the kids. But her priorities were crystal clear. Later, this purchase would become a key detail that would question not just the mother's story, but the very core of her maternal instincts. That evening around 5:30, Jeremy left for his night shift. This was the first time in a long while that he worked overnight. He was headed to work at Starbucks. And now here's a detail that makes me physically sick. A month before Lisa disappeared, Child Protective Services got an anonymous call about concerns for a child's welfare at a house on Leicester Avenue. Someone noticed that the little girl often cried at night and the parents were acting weird. The social worker wrote down the complaint and scheduled a visit for next week, then next month, and then completely forgot about the case because of his caseload. On that very night, when Jeremy left his family unprotected for the first time in ages, the child protection system was fast asleep, and nobody had any idea that this evening their home would never be safe again. Around 6:40 that evening, Deborah put Lisa in her crib. The little girl was wearing purple shorts and a t-shirt with white kittens. She fell asleep hugging her blanket. It was a moment that seemed totally normal, but this is where the night began that would turn ordinary life into the worst nightmare. The evening started peacefully, but this was the night when everything went sideways. Around 6 that evening, neighbor Samantha Brando came over to Deborah's. She brought her 4-year-old daughter, and the girls played together with Deborah's kids. At first glance, just a regular evening in a quiet neighborhood. But it would be the last time this house looked safe. The women went out on the front porch. They smoked cigarettes, talked, poured wine. The box bought a few hours earlier gradually emptied. Deborah drank fast. She later said she had anywhere from 5 to 10 glasses. Were you drinking that night? Yes. How much? Enough to be drunk. Samantha later admitted the two of them finished the entire box of wine in 4 hours. The longer the evening went on, the less Deborah remembered. She put Lisa in her crib at 6:40. She said she checked on her daughter later, but she kept changing her story, sometimes around 10 that night, sometimes admitting she never looked in the room after 6:40. She couldn't remember if she even checked on her daughter after putting her to sleep. Her memory faded with each drink. Samantha left the house around 10:30 that night. Deborah said she was going to bed. Actually, she didn't even remember when she went to sleep, whether she turned off the lights, whether she locked the doors. She only remembered bits and pieces. The older son fell asleep in his room. The younger one came into her bed. Wine mixed with exhaustion and everything sank into darkness. And in that darkness, something terrible was already happening. Guys, tragedies like this happen more often than we think. If you haven't shared this story yet, do it right now. Maybe your repost will help someone recognize danger in time. Check if you have notifications turned on. Each story like this could save someone's life one day. About 4 that morning, after a long night shift at Starbucks, Jeremy Irwin finally came home. He was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. But from the first step inside, he felt something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. That already seemed strange. Deborah always locked it at night, especially when she was alone with the kids. Lights were on inside. Not just one lamp, but several in the living room, kitchen, hallways. The house looked like someone had left in a hurry. Jeremy was surprised, but at first blamed it on his wife's tiredness. Going further, he noticed another detail. The window screen in the computer room was damaged. The window looked like someone had tried to force it open, but no real signs of break-in, just unexplained mess. Jeremy decided to check on the kids. The older son was sleeping in his room. The younger one was next to Deborah, who was lying in bed almost unconscious from exhaustion and alcohol. At the foot of the bed, weirdly enough, sat a stray cat that had somehow gotten into the house that night. The family never had cats. It was a small thing, but it added another strange touch to the chaos. Only after that did Jeremy go to his daughter's room. The door, which was usually closed, was open. The crib was empty. Lisa was gone. At first, he didn't believe it. He checked the blanket, looked around the room, searched the whole house. Then he woke up Deborah. "Where's Lisa?" He kept asking over and over, but there was no answer. The woman, confused and half asleep, didn't even understand what he was saying at first. Panic started immediately. They ran through the rooms, looked in closets, under beds, went outside, called their daughter's name, but she couldn't answer. She was only 10 months old. Then they decided to call police. But where the phones always were, there was nothing. 3 cell phones gone along with Lisa. Only thanks to Jeremy's work phone could they call 911. At that moment, the house that just a few hours ago seemed normal and safe turned into the scene of the most horrifying mystery. Police arrived immediately. The neighborhood filled with flashing lights and officers' voices. They started searching for the baby, checking the house, yards, wooded areas. The first hours were critical, and everyone hoped Lisa was still nearby. But as investigators started piecing together the night's events, disturbing details began to emerge. First, there were the dogs. The Irwins had a dog. So did the neighbors. Both usually barked at any stranger. But that night, witnesses confirmed there had been complete silence. No barking, no alarm. Like whoever entered the house was someone the animals knew, or someone who knew exactly how to keep them quiet. Then there was the mysterious phone call. When police examined the family's phone records, they discovered that just before midnight at 11:57, one of the missing cell phones had made a short call, just 50 seconds. The call went to a woman named Megan Wright. She denied answering the phone. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Wright's neighbor and frequent visitor at the time was a man with a criminal past who was known in the area by the nickname Jersey. This wouldn't mean much except for what investigators found out next. And then came the witness reports. We have not had no support from them at all. No thank you. No nothing. Like I said in the beginning, I did, have that a couple weeks with Debbie, and, that was very enjoyable. I thought we'd have her out here. One man on a motorcycle saw a stranger around 2:30 in the morning, walking down the night street with a child in his arms. The child was lightly dressed, almost naked, despite the cold October night. Another couple described the same man, average height, skinny, maybe 40 or so. A third witness swore he saw on gas station video a person coming out of the woods with a baby in his arms. That same night around 2:30 in the morning, a fire started in a dumpster nearby. When firefighters arrived, they found burned children's clothes inside. It was too late to check for DNA. Only ashes remained and even more questions. Just the thought that these might have been Lisa's clothes was horrifying. We just keep going back to the places that haven't had an answer yet. Hey, keep trying. That's it. From someone in the neighborhood. I don't know. From what I understand, the family floated something like that out. I don't really know. It would be a detail of the investigation, and I can't talk about that. You said that the family's back talking with you now. Prior, they were speaking to law enforcement without representation. Do you know, are they back at the table now with representation talking to you? Are they in person? They're talking to you guys over the phone. We're together at the table. So, the way I understand it, it's not a phone call. We're just sitting down talking. That's great. As far as their representation, I don't know. That would probably be for them to address anyway. Are there other family members that are part of those discussions as well being brought to the table station? You mean like having more family members sit down and talk with detectives? Other guys, cousins, uncles, aunts, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I've said before I can't comment on details, but it's certainly no secret. Our detectives are going to talk to everybody they can. If they know somebody, it's probably a safe bet they've spoken to them. We heard that the family I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Covered under the cell phone. Pardon me? Covered under the cell phone? Not that I'm aware of. Yeah. Okay. See, just to sum up, Is there any new specific evidence? Any new specifically? Any new specific item that you focused on when you invest for 5 days? It's been nothing new, right? And frustrating. Yeah. No. The answer is still no. Anything particular like, like I said, if we've developed information that, would have mean that we could say, hey, look for a white truck with a mark of this type on it. Believe me, we'd be shouting it as loud as we could. Without that, the best thing I can say is, listen to the voice in your head. If you think you might have seen something and it's something that we can take some action on, by all means, please call the TIPS hotline. We'll check it out. That's about it. Okay, thank you. But very quickly, more disturbing details emerged about what had happened in the house itself. The front door was unlocked, something Deborah always did religiously when Jeremy worked nights. Multiple lights were left on throughout the house. Also unusual for someone going to bed. The computer room window screen was damaged, but there were no real signs of forced entry. And most terrifying, there was no trace of the child at all. In the first hours, police considered kidnapping, but after just 2 days, they officially called off the Amber Alert. It looked like law enforcement no longer expected to find the baby alive. And now for the worst part. Instead of spending the critically important first 48 hours searching for the child, police focused on interrogating the mother. They questioned Deborah for like 8 to 10 hours a day. While search teams were reduced to a minimum, investigators spent more time trying to prove the mother's guilt than looking for a living child. The child protection system failed at every single level. And the scariest part, nobody seemed to care. Investigators' attention turned to Deborah, and there were reasons for that. First, she said she last checked on her daughter at 10 in the evening. Then, she admitted she actually never looked in the room after 6:40. First, she said she had 1 or 2 glasses. Then, maybe 5, maybe 10. Her stories kept changing. And now here's a detail that made me lose faith in maternal instincts. In interrogation videos that were later released, you can see when Deborah talked about her missing daughter, she would occasionally laugh. Not from nerves, not from shock, but somehow meaninglessly inappropriately. While her 10-month-old child was missing, the mother was giggling at investigators' questions. There was also another detail. On the night of the disappearance, Deborah and her neighbor emptied an entire box of wine. Witnesses remembered that the mother was very drunk. She herself admitted, "I was drunk enough that I don't remember." This became grounds for suspicion because who can say what happened during that time when the house sank into darkness? Investigators questioned her for hours. Finally, they offered a polygraph test. She agreed. Later, police announced that she failed the test. Deborah cried and kept saying they were just trying to pin the blame on her. But society had already split into 2 camps. Those who saw her as a victim, and those who saw her as the culprit. Now all eyes turned to the main suspect, a man named John Jerzy Tenko. And this is where I lose my patience with how the protection system failed at every level. Jerzy already had 3 convictions for breaking into houses. He'd been arrested twice near daycares. Police had known about him for years. They knew he used me. They knew his favorite way in was through windows. They knew he liked to watch families with small children. And what did police do with this information? Nothing. That night, someone matching his description was indeed seen near the Irwin house. And most terrifying, it turned out the family's missing phones were used to call a woman whose number was in Deborah's contacts. A woman who used to date this Jerzy guy. Coincidence? I don't think so. But there wasn't enough evidence. Everything relied on witness statements, on assumptions, and the real picture slipped away again. On October 19, 2011, police brought specially trained dogs to the Irwin house. Cadaver dogs, those trained to find the scent of dead bodies. One of them detected the smell of death near the parents' bed, but there were no traces, no stains, no evidence, only suspicion that settled in people's minds. Days passed. The disappearance became a national sensation. TV, journalists, neighbors, everyone talked about only one child. But the media circus that erupted around the tragedy makes me sick. Journalists paid neighbors for exclusive interviews. TV channels put on shows with the family's grief, caring more about ratings than finding the child. And the most disgusting detail was that 3 days after her daughter disappeared, Deborah went to a beauty salon, got a manicure, did her hair while her 10-month-old child was missing. And the longer this story went on, the more obvious it became. Nobody had answers, but nobody was really in a hurry to look for them either. On October 8, 2011, police announced that the parents had stopped cooperating with the investigation. Deborah explained, "I reached my breaking point and told them, 'Guys, I can't do this anymore today. I need a break. Nobody was ever arrested. Nobody was found guilty. Stories kept changing. Witnesses got confused in details. Some believed Lisa was kidnapped for the black market or illegal adoption. Others whispered it was her. The mother did it.'" In January 2013, people started an online petition demanding that Deborah and Jeremy be held accountable. The accusations were harsh. Lisa was left unattended in her crib for almost 12 hours. They also claimed that Deborah was taking the antidepressant Effexor along with alcohol. Deborah's former friends spoke out against her. Shirley FF, former best friend. "When I saw her other side and learned the real Debbie, I couldn't even believe I had trusted her with anything. I don't believe her. I just don't believe her because I know she can turn her cry on like that. I know she is a good con artist." But the scariest thing was something else. After a few months, the parents returned to the house. They kept Lisa's room exactly the same. They bought clothes in her size in case she returned. They bought presents for holidays. Deborah said when she comes home, she'll know that we never stopped including her in our life. It was heartbreaking, or it raised even more suspicions. More than 10 years have passed. The Lisa Irwin case remains a cold mystery. In 2013, they found a girl named Maria in a Roma camp in Greece. Blonde, blue-eyed, the right age. Parents from all over the world hoped it was their children. DNA testing ruled out any connection to Lisa. In 2025, journalist Mean Kelly made a documentary series, Mean Kelly Investigates, a 6-part podcast series, 3 years of new interviews and investigations, hidden cameras for interviews with Jersey Tanko. Mean claimed she uncovered quite a bit and possibly got to the truth, but nobody knows the truth yet. Who called at 11:57 p.m.? Why didn't the dogs bark at the intruder? How could someone carry a child out of the house without waking anyone? Was Deborah really too drunk to notice anything? Did a stranger really get into the house through unlocked doors? What happened that night? Was it an accidental death they tried to cover up, or a horrible kidnapping that ended in fire and screams that nobody heard? 14 years later, and we still don't have answers. Lisa should be a teenager now. But instead, we're left with the same questions that haunted investigators back in 2011. And the most chilling thing, nobody still knows if Lisa is alive. My channel has over 190 stories about children who can no longer speak for themselves. Each one is a lesson that could protect living children. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any important story. Watch other videos on the channel. Knowing these warning signs could one day make you a lifesaver. We speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Today, the house on North Leicester Avenue looks normal. New family, new life. But local residents remember. They remember nights of searching with flashlights. They remember desperate cries of Lisa in the darkness. They remember how a peaceful town turned into a theater of the worst nightmare. And you know what's the most terrifying thing about this story? An innocent 10-month-old baby disappeared and nobody could do anything about it. But what makes it even worse is how the system failed at every step. Police ignored warning signs about a known predator. Social services forgot about complaints. The media turned a family's nightmare into entertainment. Everyone who was supposed to protect Lisa let her down. And worst of all, this could happen to anyone. While you're reading this, somewhere there's another Jersey with a criminal past that police didn't get around to arresting. Somewhere there's another mother who puts a bottle of wine above her child's safety. Somewhere there's another social worker who will forget about a critical complaint. Every parent in the area after that night triple-checked their locks. Every mom listened to her child's breathing in their sleep. But locks won't protect against the indifference of a system that was supposed to protect the smallest and most helpless. Because if this could happen to Lisa, it could happen to anyone. Some stories don't have endings. They just wait. Good evening, everyone. The prosecutor described the autopsy as too gruesome to see. Doctors say the girl had been beaten from head to toe. The prosecutor said the beating, which appears to have taken place over a period of time, was too graphic to tell the family, or even filed the reports in court. They say she had been horribly abused, burned with chemicals, given alcohol, battered and raped multiple times. The family saying there are more horrific details to the torture and murder that they don't want the world to have to suffer knowing, but it keeps replaying in their heads. They say these thoughts will scar them and Mika's young cousins for the rest of their lives. I'm sorry to the family. I'm sorry. I mean, for this to happen, and I'm sorry. 15-month-old Mecca Carillo was systematically tortured and beaten to death by a woman the family trusted like a sister. 3 weeks of nonstop hell. Chemical burns that left scars all over her tiny body. Hundreds of blows with blunt objects that broke the baby's bones. Sexual abuse of a child who couldn't even walk yet, forcing her to drink alcohol that burned her insides. The little one's heart stopped. Her brain was dying without oxygen, while the sadist kept delaying the call for an ambulance. For 4 days, the small body fought for life in intensive care, hooked up to machines until the family made the most terrible decision of their lives. But what happened during the sentencing became another blow to everyone who believed in justice. Mecca's father's decision turned the whole case upside down and divided public opinion. Friends, before we dive into this unbearably difficult story, I ask you to take a few important actions. Hit the like button on this video and subscribe to my channel. This helps the algorithms show these stories to more people, and maybe someone will recognize the warning signs in time. Please share this story on social media as well. Every repost can help prevent a new tragedy. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every comment and love connecting with viewers worldwide. My channel already has more than 150 stories about children whose voices were silenced forever. Each one teaches us to recognize danger and protect the innocent. September 2019, Fargo, North Dakota. Manuel Carillo and Cheyenne Duchino have a daughter, Mecca Marie Carillo Duchino, a healthy baby with chubby cheeks and trusting eyes. If she were alive today, she would be 5 years old. She would be going to kindergarten, learning letters, laughing with friends. But the happy family life didn't last long. Her father, Manuel Carillo, was imprisoned at COULDN on what were likely drug-related charges. The biological mother, Cheyenne Duchino, faced life difficulties that prevented her from caring for her daughter herself. Custody of Mecca went to her loving paternal aunt, Amanda Carillo. For Amanda, this wasn't a burden. Quite the opposite. She was like a daughter to me, Amanda said. In her home in Moorhead, Minnesota, other children were already being raised. Mecca had cousins and a 3-year-old sister who adored the baby. By October 2020, Mecca had grown into a cheerful 15-month-old girl. She was already sitting confidently, babbling her first words, and her infectious laughter filled the whole house. Bye-bye, bye-bye, Nana, Nana, Dada, Dada, yeah, Dada, Dada, Nana. No, I really want bye-bye. Mecca had reached all her developmental milestones. A healthy, active child who brought so much joy to the Carillo family. She loved hugs and kisses and gave them constantly to everyone. Aunt Amanda recalls warmly. Mecca was one of those children who reach out to every adult, not knowing that evil can exist in the world. Her boundless trust in people touched everyone around her. A normal family atmosphere reigned in Amanda's house. Mornings brought children's laughter and breakfast together. Days were spent playing in the yard. Evenings meant bedtime stories. Mecca was surrounded by love and care. No one could have imagined that this childlike trust in people would soon become the cause of her agonizing death. Later, Amanda would say through tears, "It hurts every time I walk through the door because something is missing. It hurts when I hear the children laugh because one laugh is missing. Her laugh." There was another important figure in the Carillo family's life. Brandy Linadelic, a 37-year-old Fargo resident. For over 5 years, she had been Amanda's best friend, a reliable woman tested by time, whom the family trusted unconditionally. 5 years of friendship is a serious period. Adele was present at all family holidays, saw the children's first steps, helped during difficult moments. Amanda regularly left her children with her when she needed to step away. Who else could you trust your little ones with but a proven friend who knows each child personally? Adele had extensive experience with children and an impeccable reputation in the family. She knew all the children's habits, their favorite games, their daily routine. For the Carillo family, she wasn't just a babysitter. She was part of the family. But as often happens in the most terrible criminal stories, the most horrific monsters hide behind masks of loving friends and caring helpers. Behind the smile with which Adelk had greeted children for 5 years, monstrous intentions were hidden. October 28, 2020. What seemed like an ordinary day before the fun Halloween holiday. Brandy Adelk approaches Amanda with a proposal that sounded so natural and friendly. What if Mecca stays with me for a few days? I'll give her a real Halloween. For Amanda, this wasn't anything unusual. Adele had helped with the children many times before, and everything always went perfectly. Why not let Mecca have fun at Halloween with a trusted friend? Amanda packed things for her niece, favorite toys, pajamas, everything necessary for the baby. Mecca babbled something happily, anticipating new games and entertainment. At 15 months, children don't yet understand separation. For her, this was just another interesting trip to Aunt Brandy. Amanda said goodbye to Mecca, kissed her cheek, and handed her over to Adela. None of them suspected that October 28, 2020 would be the last day the little girl would be truly happy and safe. At that moment, 15-month-old Mecca, who gave hugs to everyone and trustingly reached out to every adult, fell into the hands of a woman who had already decided what she was going to do to her. After Amanda handed Mecca over to Adelk on October 28th, it should have been an ordinary weekend with the baby returning home. But when Amanda came to pick up her niece, the first deception awaited her. Adela claimed that CO-19 had been discovered in her apartment and Mecca would have to stay in quarantine. Don't worry, I'll take care of her. It's better if she gets sick here so she doesn't infect the other children at home, Adele said convincingly. Amanda believed her. How could she not believe her best friend who had cared for her children for 5 years? Police later established that there was no CO in the apartment. It was a lie to get more time for torture. Imagine 15-month-old Mecca in those first days of November. She still hoped that Aunt Amanda would come get her soon. Still trustingly reached out to Adele, waiting for games and affection. Still didn't understand that she had fallen into the hands of a sadist who saw her not as a child, but as an object for perverted fantasies. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on. Many people watch these stories but don't subscribe yet. Every subscription helps these important cases reach more people who need to see them. Please share this video. Your repost might help someone recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Adelk's apartment at 2301 117th Street South in Fargo turned into a real torture chamber for little Mecca. Each day brought new torments for the baby, who couldn't even understand why she was being punished. Adele systematically beat the child with blunt objects. Imagine the tiny body of a 15-month-old girl covered with bruises and abrasions from head to toe. Little hands that had recently reached out for hugs now instinctively protected themselves from new blows. Mecca cried, screamed, called for Aunt Amanda, but no one heard her pleas for help. Neighbors later said they heard a child crying but thought it was ordinary tantrums. Adelk poured chemical substances on the baby that ate away at her tender child's skin. Burns covered the girl's entire body, face, arms, legs, torso. Mecca writhed in pain, but the monster didn't stop. What I'm about to tell you is impossible for a sane person to comprehend. Adelk subjected 15-month-old Mecca to sexual abuse in various ways. A child who couldn't even walk yet became the victim of an adult woman's perverted fantasies. The baby screamed from pain and incomprehension. At 15 months, children don't understand what's happening to them, but they feel pain. Unbearable tearing pain. Adelk forced Mecca to drink alcohol. Imagine how the throat and stomach of a tiny child burned from liquor. How the small body tried to cope with the poison being poured into it by the sadist. By mid-November, Mecca's condition was critical. Her tiny body was one continuous wound. Bone fractures, internal bleeding, burns, traces of sexual violence. But Adelk continued the torture. Mecca no longer cried so loudly. She simply had no strength left. Quiet sobs, labored breathing, the glazed look of a child who no longer believes anyone will come to help. On November 19th, the baby was already dying. Adelic understood that she had brought the child to a critical condition, but continued to torment her. That day, she decided to bathe Mecca, the final torture before death. November 20th, 2020, around 1000 p.m., Adele put the dying Mecca in a bathtub with water and left her there for 2 hours. The baby was so weak she couldn't keep her head above water. When Adelic returned, Mecca was underwater, not breathing. Her skin had taken on a bluish tint. Only then did the sadist realize she had killed the child. In panic, she began hitting the baby in the face, pinching her, trying to bring her to consciousness. "Wake up! Wake up!" She screamed at the lifeless body of the girl she had tortured for 3 weeks. Mecca coughed once. That was her last sound while conscious. After that, she lost consciousness again and never came to. At 10:44 p.m., Adelic finally called for an ambulance, but it was too late. Mecca had been clinically dead for at least 2 minutes. The baby's brain was irreversibly damaged from lack of oxygen. When medics saw Mecca's body, they immediately understood this wasn't an accident. This was systematic torture of a child. The baby's entire body was covered with injuries of different ages, fresh wounds next to those already healing. Amanda rushed to the hospital and saw a picture that became her nightmare for the rest of her life. A room surrounded by forensic experts, paper bags for evidence, rulers for measuring wounds, photo equipment for documenting the crime. When I arrived, it looked like a horror movie set, Amanda said. And in the center of it all lay her little Mecca, connected to machines that maintained life in her mutilated body. Adele was still trying to lie. She just got sick. Amanda, she's just sick. But the doctors already knew the truth. Mecca wasn't sick. She was being killed slowly, methodically, for 3 weeks straight. November 24th, 2020. At 8:08 a.m., the family made the most terrible decision of their lives. The life support machines were turned off. Little Mecca finally found peace. She was only 15 months old. She lived in this world for 456 days, and the last 23 days were hell. After Mecca's death, an investigation began that shocked even experienced Fargo detectives. The medical examiner established the cause of death: multiple injuries from blunt objects all over the body. Homicide, murder, but the worst was yet to come. When investigators received the full autopsy report, they made an unprecedented decision. The family was strongly recommended not to read this document. "This will change you forever," the detective told Amanda. Assistant District Attorney Ryan Youngren, who had seen hundreds of child abuse cases, refused to read the details in open court. "Usually, when I say injuries from head to toe, it's metaphorical. But not in this case," he stated. Even Mecca's grandmother, Cindy Carillo, wrote in a letter to the court, "We were told not to read the autopsy report out of fear that it would change us as people." January 14th, 2021. Almost 2 months after Mecca's death, Brandy Adele was arrested and charged with murder and child abuse. Bail was set at $1 million. 2 months of freedom after murdering an infant. While Mecca's family buried the baby and tried to live with this pain, the killer walked freely through the streets of Fargo. In her jail cell, Adelic finally confessed to what she had done. But her version of events was so cynical that investigators couldn't believe their ears. She claimed she had left the child in the bathtub for 2 hours accidentally, that she didn't want to cause harm. Didn't want to cause harm. A woman who systematically tortured an infant for 3 weeks claims she didn't want to hurt her. Who poured chemicals on a tiny body, raped a child, forced her to drink alcohol, didn't want to harm. September 7th, 2021. The day before the trial was to begin, Adele suddenly changed her plea from not guilty to guilty on both charges. The maximum punishment for these charges was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Adel's attorney, Stephen Mottinger, tried to justify his client. She had mental health problems. She couldn't cope with the situation and made a tragic mistake. A tragic mistake. That's what the lawyer called 3 weeks of sadistic torture of an innocent child. Chemical burns all over an infant's body. A mistake. Sexual abuse of a 15-month-old girl. A mistake. Systematic beating to death. A mistake. December 6, 2021, the court session for sentencing took place. Details so gruesome, Cass County State's Attorney Ryan Youngren declined to recount. In a letter to the court penned by Mika's grandmother, Cindy, she wrote of the immense heartache felt by the family, words that choked up even the seasoned prosecutor. Everyone in the courtroom was crying. The judge, jury, lawyers, journalists. Amanda read her statement. "I don't understand how you could take a life of an innocent child and what she could have done so badly that made you hurt her. I feel pain every time I walk in my door because there's something's missing. I feel pain every time I hear my kids laugh because there's a little laughter missing." But the most unexpected turn awaited everyone when Mecca's father, Mecca Carillo, took the floor. Remember, he was in prison during his daughter's murder and couldn't even say goodbye to her before death. He was only allowed to attend the funeral for a few hours in handcuffs. This man, who lost his only daughter in the most cruel way, stood up and said words that shocked the entire courtroom. And he said, "I think her life is still worth something and still worth saving." And I was surprised that he even said it. My mom was too. You know, they all wanted life sentences, but that still wouldn't have been enough time. I forgive her, but I will never forget what she did. A life sentence won't bring back my daughter. Her life still means something. Her life is still worth saving. A man who couldn't protect his daughter because he was behind bars stood before the court and performed an act that doesn't fit human understanding. A father who had to make the decision to disconnect life support from his only child asked the court to show mercy to the woman who turned his daughter's last days into hell on earth. The courtroom fell silent. Even Judge Stephen Marquardt couldn't hold back tears. Prosecutor Ryan Yunrin later said, "In most similar cases, families demand maximum punishment. This was the first case in my practice where the victim's father asked for mercy. And he said, 'I think her life is still worth something and still worth saving.' And I was surprised that he even said that my mom was too. You know, they all wanted life sentences, but that still wouldn't have been enough time. Dada. Yeah, dada." Taking into account the father's request, the court sentenced Brandy Adele to 30 years in prison with the right to parole after 25 years. Only 30 years in prison for slowly killing a defenseless infant over 3 weeks. 30 years for hundreds of blows to a tiny body, for burns that covered the child's entire skin, for sexual abuse of a baby who couldn't even walk, for forcing a 15-month-old girl to drink alcohol, for turning the last 23 days of an innocent child's life into endless agony. This means that in 2046, when Adelic turns 63, she can apply for early release. Mecca would have been 27 years old by then. She could have finished university, found work, started a family, had children, but she won't have that chance, and her killer will. When Adele was given the floor before sentencing, she stood up and said, "I didn't want this to happen. I'm just sorry, that's all. I'm sorry to the family, and I'm sorry I didn't mean for this to happen, and I'm sorry." No explanations, no details, no remorse for specific actions. Just sorry for 3 weeks of sadistic torture of an infant. Notably, Mecca's biological mother, Cheyenne Duchino, didn't appear in court and gave no statements to the press. Her silence throughout the entire case remains a mystery, whether from grief or for other reasons. But the woman who gave life to Mecca couldn't or wouldn't fight for justice for her daughter. Each story I tell serves a purpose: to educate, to warn, and to honor those we've lost. In the comments, share your thoughts. Is 30 years enough? How do you feel about the father's decision to show mercy? Please share this video. Every view could be the one that saves a child. Mecca Carillo Duchino lived 456 days. If she were alive today, she would be 5 years old. She would be laughing, playing with toys, hugging Aunt Amanda. But her voice was silenced forever. Amanda created a GoFundMe called Justice for Mecca and held a private memorial service on February 6, 2021. The family is still struggling with trauma, and that's what haunts me every day. I couldn't protect her. You know, I didn't protect her. Nobody ever thought that she would do something like this. All of a sudden, she comes out of nowhere and she sits there no chance, no nothing. She's like, "Mick's on her way to the hospital, you know, and I don't want to be any more angry than I already am." Like, you know, and like, I don't want to know, but I do, you know, like, there's just a lot of questions. I say I apologize to her a lot, you know. I do, like, that's the one thing, like, I will never forgive myself for Children ask when Mecca will wake up and grow up to play with them again. Mika's 3-year-old sister Octavia asks, when Ma gets bigger, will she wake up and play with me? How do you explain that to a 3-year-old? I would not wish this on anyone, not even you, Brandy. We speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. On my channel, you'll find many more important stories. Each one teaches us to be more attentive to the children around us. I will forgive her, but I will never forget what she's done. He's like, me giving her a life sentence is not going to bring my daughter back. I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who watched this video all the way through. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'd also like to send a special thank you to everyone who has donated to support my channel. Your support means the world to me and gives me the motivation to keep making new and interesting investigations for you, my wonderful viewers. Thank you all so much.